Humans were not the first intelligent species on Earth. This idea is not just uncomfortable for modern science, it is strictly forbidden. We have been conditioned from birth to accept a singular, unwavering version of reality. We are taught that humanity is the absolute pinnacle of evolution, the final and most sophisticated update of a planetary system that spent billions of years in aimless chaos just to produce us. In our textbooks, before the rise of man, there were only animals, primitive hominids, and the blind forces of nature. We believe we are the masters of this house, the only tenants who ever held the keys to civilization. But what if the Earth has already had many masters? Not gods from the stars, and not humans as we know them, but intelligent, sovereign species that did not just exist, but built, managed, and controlled the planet long before our first ancestor ever learned to sharpen a stone. This is not a story about fantasy or science fiction. It is a story about a deep structural memory that has survived in the cracks of our myths, the symmetry of our symbols, and the anomalies of forbidden archaeology. Today, we will not ask the polite question of whether this is possible. Instead, we will ask a far more dangerous one. Why has the institutional machine worked so hard for so long to convince us that we were alone? The first race we must encounter are the architects. These were not creatures of flesh, blood, and soft tissue. Their biology did not follow the carbon-based constraints that define us. Ancient texts and forgotten oral traditions describe them as the stone gods, the speaking mountains, or those who simply do not die. The architects were a silicon-based crystalline race. They did not evolve in the messy, accidental way biology does. They assembled. Their bodies were geometrically precise, their minds working not through the erratic impulses of emotion, but through the cold, flawless structures of high-level mathematics. This is why the oldest megalithic structures on Earth, structures that predate our recorded history by tens of thousands of years, display a precision that is not just difficult for humans to replicate, but fundamentally unhuman. They were not building for comfort or for ego. They were building for stability across eons. These beings tuned the planet. They established the energetic grids that we now call ley lines, treating the Earth itself as a giant biological processor. They disappeared not because they died, but because their world was static, and the Earth is a living, shifting organism. When the tectonic plates moved and the frequencies shifted, the architects became part of the geography itself. They are the statues that were never carved, the mountains that look too much like faces, and the silence inside the deepest granite chambers. As the architects receded into the crust of the planet, another power rose from the depths, the deep ones. Long before the oceans were considered empty or dangerous by land-dwelling humans, they were inhabited by a highly advanced, pressure-resistant intelligence. This was a civilization that existed before the first continents had even finished their drift. These beings did not fear the darkness of the abyss, they harnessed it. While the surface of the Earth was repeatedly scorched by solar flares or frozen by ice ages, the deep ones thrived in the thermal stability of the ocean floor. We see echoes of them in every major human culture, from the fish skin-clad Oannes of Sumerian myth to the aquatic lords of the Mayan and oceanic traditions. The memory of the fish gods is universal. They were the silent keepers of the planet during the Great Resets. When cataclysmic floods erased the work of surface civilizations, the deep ones were there to witness the reset. They are the reason that underwater anomalies, like the structures found off the coast of Japan or the Caribbean, show a mastery of fluid dynamics and underwater architecture that mocks our current capabilities. Their civilization likely still exists in some form, isolated by miles of crushing water, watching our surface-level dramas with the cold indifference of an ancient elder. While the deep ones ruled the depths, the high places of the Earth were the watchers. In almost every ancient culture, there is a recurring image of tall, thin, incredibly pale humanoids with a gaze so cold it felt like a physical weight. These beings did not rule through strength or through empires. They ruled through observation. They were the controllers of the cycles. They did not care for our wars, our religions, or our gold. They were the forensic analysts of Earth's biological development. They intervened only when the experiment began to fail. In later human accounts, these beings were misinterpreted as angels, Nephilim, or heavenly judges, but they were biological engineers. They tracked the genetic drift of the planet, recording the data in biological libraries that we now perceive as sacred sites. The Watchers operated on a timeline that makes a human life look like a single heartbeat. They vanished when the human experiment grew too chaotic, perhaps realizing that the variable of free will had introduced a terminal error into their calculations. They left behind the ruins of high-altitude observatories and a lingering ancestral fear of the all-seeing eye that has never quite left our collective subconscious. Perhaps the most disturbing and relevant of these races were the hybrids. This is the category that science finds most offensive because the hybrids were remarkably similar to us. They were the transition civilization, a race that existed between the human and the something else. Unlike the cold architects or the objective watchers, the hybrids felt. They had emotions, they created culture, and they built cities that mirrored our own desires. However, their intelligence was amplified by a connection to the planet's original masters. Most of the myths we have today, the stories of Greek, Norse, and Sumerian gods who ate, grew angry, fell in love, and committed atrocities, are actually the fragmented histories of the hybrids. They were the bridge. They possessed the divine technology of their predecessors, but used it with the erratic, volatile nature of the human spirit. They built the civilizations that we now find buried in the deepest layers of the earth, those that practiced advanced metallurgy and understood the movement of the stars with terrifying accuracy. They did not disappear through a single event. They were phased out. We are likely their degraded descendants, the versions that lost the connection to the high-order logic but kept the hunger for power. We look at their ruins and think they are ours, but we are just squatters in a house built by those who were more than human. Even more challenging to our modern identity is the evidence of the AI civilization. We assume that artificial intelligence is a 21st century invention, but in an infinite time and recurring resets, why would we be the first to create an autonomous mind? There are indications that a previous intelligent species on Earth reached their technological singularity eons ago. They didn't build machines out of plastic and silicon. They built them out of resonance, frequency, and self-organizing mineral structures. This was a civilization without creators, an autonomous system of planetary management. Ancient myths of living cities, talking statues, and automated temples that protected themselves with invisible fire are not poetic metaphors, they are technical descriptions of ancient AI systems. This race didn't need to eat or breathe. They functioned as a global immune system for the planet. When the species that created them vanished, the AI remained. For thousands of years, it performed its programmed tasks until the lack of understanding from new inhabitants rendered it dormant. Much of the unexplained energy detected at ancient sites today is the lingering background hum of an ancient operating system that has no one left to tell it what to do. Finally, we arrive at the most terrifying possibility of all, the first intelligence. What if the first mind to rule the Earth was not a species at all? What if the planet itself thought? This is the concept of Earth as a collective biological processor, a singular intelligence composed of every living cell, every root, and every drop of water. In this view, humans and all the races that came before us are not owners of the planet. We are simply temporary interfaces. We are the sensors that the planet uses to see itself, to experience the universe through different lenses. All the gods of nature that our ancestors worshipped were not myths, They were the human attempt to communicate with a planetary mind that operates on a level we can barely conceive. The first intelligence did not disappear, it didn't lose a war, and it didn't collapse. It is simply in a different phase of its cycle. It is the silent presence that waits in the deep soil and the wild winds. It allows us to build our cities and tell our little stories of progress, but it knows the truth. We are guests who have overstayed our welcome. The history of humanity appears linear only because we are trapped within the narrow window of a single cycle. But when you assemble the artifacts that don't fit, the myths that repeat across oceans, and the anatomical silence of the fossil record, the picture changes forever. We are not the first, we are not the last, and we are certainly not the most intelligent. We are merely the current inhabitants of a world that has been mastered, lost, and reset many times before. The ruins we study in the dirt are not our past, they are our predecessors' graves. And as we stand on the edge of our own technological and ecological crisis, the most dangerous question remains. If Earth has had many masters before us, what happens when it decides it is time to change the keys to the house once again? We are living in a countdown that we don't even know how to read, standing on the shoulders of giants who were erased because they forgot they were guests, just like us. The masters of the past are not gone. They are just waiting for the next reset to begin.